We tend to think of our minds and our bodies as two totally separate things, right? What happens up here in our head is one story, and what happens in our body, well, that's a whole other chapter. But what if that entire division is just an illusion? Today, we are diving deep into the very real, very physical, hardwired connection between your thoughts and your health. It's a journey that's going to take us from some really bizarre ancient remedies all the way to the cutting edge of modern neuroscience.
Okay, get this. Back in ancient times, if you had a killer toothache, one of the go-to prescriptions was to find a donkey and just give it a kiss. I know, it sounds completely ridiculous, but here's the crazy part. People swore by it. And the real question is why? Well, the answer is as simple as it is mind-blowing. For a lot of them, it actually worked.
So what on earth was going on there? Was it all just superstition? A powerful story people told themselves, and they just willed themselves to feel better? Or was there something else? A real, actual chemical reaction happening inside their brain that literally made the pain disappear? That is the exact question we are digging into.
To solve this whole donkey mystery, we first have to talk about the donkey in the room, so to speak. And that's one of the most powerful, and honestly, one of the most misunderstood forces in all of medicine, the placebo effect. And trust me, this goes so far beyond just sugar pills.
Right, so the most important thing to get is that a placebo isn't just all in your head. It's not about fooling yourself. It triggers a real, measurable, physiological response in your body. Your simple belief, your expectation that something is going to work, can cause your brain to create its own very real pain-relieving effects.
See, at its very core, your brain is a prediction machine. That's its main job. It is constantly taking in everything you've ever experienced, applying it to what's happening right now, and trying to guess what's coming next. A placebo basically hijacks this system. It plants a powerful seed of expectation, the expectation of relief, and then your brain gets to work to make that prediction a reality. Think about how pain usually works, right? A signal travels up from, say, your stubbed toe to your brain. Ouch. But a placebo works in the complete opposite direction. It starts in the prefrontal cortex, the logical thinking part of your brain, with just an idea, an expectation of relief. That thought then travels downwards, like a command from headquarters, telling the deeper parts of your brain to start pumping out its own powerful pain-killing drugs. And that leads us to one of the most incredible, mind-bending facts in all of neuroscience. Your brain has its own fully stocked pharmacy. A drug cabinet that can create and dispense incredibly powerful chemicals on demand, no prescription necessary.
And I'm not talking about some watered-down substitutes here. Your brain can produce its own opioids. We're talking the same chemical family as morphine. It can create its own cannabinoids, which are the active compounds in marijuana. And of course, it produces dopamine and serotonin, the chemicals that have this huge impact on our mood and motivation. These are real drugs, manufactured right inside your own head.
And look, this is not just some wild theory. A groundbreaking 2025 study actually confirmed it by mapping the exact neural circuit. Scientists trained people to expect pain relief, and then they watched, in real time, as the brain's prefrontal cortex sent out the signal to release its own internal opioids, which then went and physically blocked the pain signals. They found a biological off switch for pain, triggered by belief.
So the placebo effect is just this stunning example of the mind influencing the body. But really, it's just one tiny piece of a much bigger, constant conversation that's happening every second of every day. Our brain and our immune system are always talking to each other, and this dialogue is studied by this really fascinating field called psychoneuroimmunology.
I know, it is a mouthful, but it's a completely legitimate, serious scientific field, and it's dedicated to understanding that whole feedback loop. How our thoughts and feelings affect our nervous system, how our nervous system then relays messages to our immune system, and, this is the cool part, how our immune system then sends messages right back to the brain.
Okay, so how does this conversation actually happen? I mean, how can a thought possibly turn into an immune cell doing something different? Well, scientists have figured out that this communication flows along three major superhighways that connect your mind and your body. First off, there are actual physical meeting places. Check this out. These are what they call immune niches, and they're right there at the border of the brain, in places like the meninges, that protective layer around it. In these specific zones, you have immune cells and nerve cells literally touching, side by side, constantly swapping information. It's like a biological border crossing where these two systems are in a constant huddle. So just to quickly recap those three highways, you've got the physical brain border niches we just looked at. Then you've got the vagus nerve, which is basically a direct fiber optic cable running from the brainstem down to your major organs, constantly monitoring your immune system. And finally, there's the amazing gut-brain axis, where the trillions of microbes living in your gut are sending chemical messages up to your brain that directly influence your health and even your mood.
Now, this constant chatter between brain and body is absolutely essential for keeping us healthy. But what happens when the signals get crossed? What happens when this incredibly intricate network starts to break down? Well, the results can be catastrophic.
And this is where the science of the mind-body connection gets really, really serious. Because a miscommunication in this network isn't just some minor glitch. It can actually be the root cause of some of the most devastating chronic illnesses we face.
I mean, take multiple sclerosis, for example. 2.5 million people around the world are affected by it. And MS is just a tragic example of this communication network failing. The body's own immune system gets a bad signal, a faulty message, and it mistakenly attacks the protective coating around its own nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord.
Or what about Alzheimer's disease, affecting 5.8 million Americans? We now know that there's this silent phase of the disease where inflammation, which is an immune response, is quietly damaging the brain for years or even decades before a single symptom shows up. This suggests that a breakdown in this mind-body communication could be one of the very first dominoes to fall on the path to Alzheimer's.
So, what does all this mean for the future of our health? It means we are right on the edge of a huge, profound shift in how we understand and maybe even how we treat disease.
Science writer Eric Vance puts it perfectly. He calls this a new enlightenment in medicine. He says we've moved from the dark ages, superstition, kissing donkeys, to a kind of mechanical view of the body, where we think of drugs as just keys fitting into locks. But this new era, this new enlightenment, sees the body for what it truly is, a completely integrated system, where our beliefs and our biology are profoundly intertwined.
So if you take just one thing away from all of this, let it be this. The mind-body connection is not some vague wellness concept. It's not just a nice idea. It is a physical, hardwired, biological reality of nerves and chemicals and cells. Your thoughts and your beliefs aren't separate from your biology. They are a part of your biology.
Which of course brings us all the way back to that donkey. We started with what seemed like a totally absurd superstition, and we ended up looking at hardwired neural circuits. We now know for a fact that a simple belief can trigger our own internal pharmacy to release powerful, custom-made drugs. And as we learn more and more about how to harness this incredible power, it leaves us with one heck of a question. What does the future of medicine look like when we finally realize the most powerful pharmacy in the world is the one we already have inside our own head?